We are making the creme brulee recipe tonight. So I've got in my saucepan a 1/2 cup of sugar, and it's really important that you do use a heavy bottomed saucepan for this so that the heat is really evenly distributed. I'm going to add to that about 1 tablespoon of water, maybe just a pinch more there, and just a little bit of corn syrup. And the corn syrup is going to help ensure that this is going to work, basically. We're starting this creme brulee by making a caramel, and that gives the creme brulee a really nice warm caramely flavor, obviously. So what we're doing here is once we get the heat going, is we're melting this sugar in the water, and then eventually we're going to start boiling that, and that helps the water evaporate and helps the sugar turn into a caramel without burning right away. So the water is kind of a buffer for toasting that sugar. The corn syrup in there just helps ensure that the sugar doesn't recrystallize and basically turn into rock candy as that water evaporates. That's the #1 problem people will have with this recipe, is once this turns into a liquid and that sugar dissolves, if it recrystallizes, you're kind of out of luck and you've got to start over. So the corn syrup will help mitigate that concern. So I'm going to stir this around until it starts to liquidize, and eventually we'll get a clear liquid and see that there are no more crystals in there. And then we'll show you what that looks like and go to the next point. So you can see now we have a clear liquid. All the sugar crystals have dissolved. And if this takes longer than maybe 5 minutes or so, you probably want to add in more water. Maybe a tablespoon at a time. Add a tablespoon, stir it a little more. If it's still taking a while, add a tablespoon, stir in a little more. And it's different every time you do it, how much it's going to take. You may also want to try to turn the heat up a little bit if it's not dissolving quickly. Just make sure you don't get it so it's continually boiling and that water starts evaporating while you're still trying to add more to get the sugar to dissolve. So you want to make sure you have a clear liquid before it really starts boiling. So those are a couple tips if it's taken a while. At this point, I'm going to monitor my boil and watch what's going on here. Right now we have our clear solution, and as it boils and that water evaporates out, it's going to get to be a darker color. So it's going to get golden, it's going to start to get kind of a deeper amber color eventually, if we let it go long enough, up to a mahogany. There's a couple things you want to do as it's boiling. At this point, just sit there and let it go and don't touch it. Eventually you're going to notice that a lot of sugar gets up on the sides from the bubbles breaking, and you may see that it starts to get a little bit dried out. And I'll show you when we get there what to do when that happens. So this is starting to look really nice here. You can obviously see that the color has changed quite a bit, and the color change happens quickly. It goes for a while, depending on how much water is in there, it goes for a while just boiling and staying pretty clear or very lightly colored, and then very fast it'll make this shift. You can also see that the bubbles are moving a lot more slowly, which means that a lot of that water is evaporated out, and we're really just looking at a liquid sugar here. The bubbles are actually doubling up on each other too, so there's big bubbles on top of little bubbles, and that's a sign that we have the sugar. It's starting to smoke a little bit, so I'm going to stop it there. We have a pretty rich burnt amber caramel. The darker you let it go, the richer the caramel flavor is going to be. At this point now, I've got the heat turned off. I'm going to very slowly add in my cream, and it's going to bubble pretty vigorously when this cream goes in. So you want that first bit to go pretty slow, and stir. And drizzle it in slowly to begin with. That cold cream can cause bits of the sugar to crystallize again. So you may get little chunks of sugar in there. And we'll do a little more. And as you get more cream in, you can add it a little more steadily. So we'll just want to stir this cream into the caramel, a full 2 cups. And as I get it in there and stir, I can feel on the bottom where there are a couple little chunks of the caramel, mostly in the corners of the pan. So I'm going to put my heat back onto low and keep stirring that until I can feel that those couple sticky spots are gone. And then I know all of the sugar has redissolved back into that cream. Once I feel that that's totally smooth, I've got one little point right there. Once that's smooth, I'm just going to set it aside to start to cool for a second, and we'll go on to the next step. The caramel mixture is smooth, so it's just sitting and cooling from the heat. And I'm going to go on and start the next step while that's happening. So I've got 5 egg yolks in here, and I put the whites back in the fridge to save them for something else. I'm going to add to my egg yolks a 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. And then this mixture, I'm going to use the KitchenAid. You could use a hand mixer as well. That would work just fine. And we're just going to beat that on medium speed until it gets pale in color. It should take a few minutes. As you watch, the color will get lighter and lighter and lighter as it goes. So you can see the color has changed quite a bit in there. Now this next part can get a little messy if you move too quickly, so you do want to do this slowly. I've got my nice, cool, somewhat, caramel cream mixture here, and I just need to slowly beat that into the egg mixture. Now you do want to do this on very low speed. If you do it quickly, you get a lot of bubbles that get worked in, and then when you have your final creme brulees, they all have bubbles on the top, and it's just not pretty. So you want to put it on a very low speed and slowly pour in your cream. You don't need to beat these together, just get them to mix. And if you can avoid the cream mixture hitting the beaters, that will get you fewer bubbles. So there we go, that's all blended. We have some big ones in there, but those will pop. It's little ones that turn into trouble. So now, we are done with that. And we can put this into our ramekins. So I have half a dozen ramekins here. You don't need to butter them or anything like that. And we're going to try to evenly pour this between the 6 of them. At that point, once it's in there, I'm just going to fill the tin or the tray that they're in with water that goes about halfway up each ramekin, and that just helps so that they bake more evenly in that water bath. I have a 300-degree oven that's preheated, so the creme brulees in the water bath will go in the 300-degree oven, and we'll check it in about 40 minutes to see what they look like. So it's been 45 minutes, and to check if they're done, you kind of poke them with something in there. No, it's not working so well. You can see that they're going to jiggle just slightly, but then get back to kind of their solid form. So a little jiggle in the middle, but not too much. All around is what we're looking for, firmer edges. Careful when you pull this out, that water is hot. So we've got those out of there. We're going to want to pull them out of the water bath and let them cool for a few minutes so they're not oven temperature. And then we'll cover them and put them in the fridge overnight. See you tomorrow. So it's finally the day we get to eat the creme brulee. So this is a good one. Last night we made these. We put them in the fridge, covered overnight so they don't dry out. So the custards are completely cool now. So now the job is to brulee them, and that's the fun part. There's 2 ways to do this. No matter what you do though, you always want to start by getting a sugar crust on top. So we just need to, as evenly as we can, sprinkle sugar over the top. You want it to be thick enough that you don't see the custard through it, because then when you torch it, the custard itself will burn, which isn't awful, but it tastes better if it's not burned. But you don't want it so thick that there's a lot of sugar to burn through, because the sugar on top will burn and the sugar on the bottom will still be crystallized, and we want to have it as one even coating. So that looks pretty good. At this point, if you want to use your broiler, you just want to have your broiler preheated and put these in on the top level of your oven. Watch it really carefully, because as soon as they start to bubble up, they go really quickly and it's easy to burn them. The other option is to light them on fire with a torch, which is way more fun. So that's what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do here, I just have a kitchen butane torch. I want to light this as evenly as I can, so you can see the sugar starting to liquidize and burn there. And as soon as it starts bubbling and we get that brown, you want to be careful about where you're going with your torch so you don't completely burn it. At the same time, you have to get everything on those edges so we don't end up with sugar crystals. So that looks pretty good there. So that'll just kind of bubble up and get hard. I'm going to put it back in the fridge now. And if you can do this about between 1 and 3 hours before you eat, that's perfect. As this goes back in the fridge, the sugar on top will harden and the custard on the inside will get cooled down, because it's a little warm right now, right under that crust. So you get the nice crunchy top and then the nice cool creamy custard underneath. If you tried to eat it right now, the top wouldn't crunch. You could torch it and then eat it in 5 minutes and it would be just fine. But the texture of the custard's nicer when you can get it cooled again. So I prefer to do it between 1 and 3 hours before you eat. If you wait too long, your top's going to get soggy. So don't do it in the morning and go to work all day. But that one's good to go. So we'll go through and torch the rest and have a great dinner tonight. Enjoy.